Everyone, Moonlily Games here with the second top 8 deck. This is the Magic Garga deck. So obviously we'll start with the buddy, which is Deity Garga. He's slightly better than the original Gargas in my opinion. One, because he has Penetrate, and two, he has Move, which I know usually you don't have one or the other. He also has DDG Evo, which is once per turn during both your turn and your opponent's turn, where you can draw one card and technically G-evolve him into another Gargantua Dragon. He also can revert by paying his call cost. Also, when he's your buddy, he lets you run pretty much any Gargantua Dragon you want. When I originally built this deck, I was really heavy on the OG Gargas, like running the original double attack. Now I'm just running Daybreak as the other base Garga, mainly for the draw. So usually I'll swing just to gain draw. This is usually my brick. Onto the G Evos. I originally started with 4 during the tournament of the Blade Mage, mainly to deal effect damage. There was a lot of Max Dragon, Bloodsuck. I wanted to not deal with actually having to swing over big monsters, but a lot of things couldn't be destroyed, even by card effect, so I had to sideboard other things. So now that the tournament's over, I have gone to playing 2 Gatling instead. Gatling lets you either deal damage, pop something, or deal a gauge. And so usually instead of restanding with some of the spells in Magic World, I'll restand Gatling instead. So usually I'll break even if I can at least pull off one or the other. And then my last DVG Evos and G Evos will be the Shadow Dive Garga. He Shadow Dives towards the opponent, can also pop a monster, and if he does, you will deal 2 damage and draw 1 card. So you plus a lot from decks that actually lets you destroy their monsters. And then for bigger walls, I run the Wind Demon Garga that lets you create tokens every time he swings. And when he has a G Evo Garga in his soul, he'll let you make everything +5 that is a Dragon Deity tribe. So even your tokens can swing for 11. My last minute tech before I wrote my deck list was playing 4 of the Gauge 1 Draw 2 Magidog for discarding a Dragon Deity tribe. This is probably one of the things I wanted to see immediately turn 1. The other of the Guard Trio that I run is just the Magicat. Honestly, I see a lot of people run Magicat at like 3 and 4, but I lost 2 of my games mainly because it was the only monster in my hand, and you can't play him unless you have a Dragon Deity tribe on the field. But at least he lets you search the top 3 for a spell with the rest on the bottom, and this, unlike a dog, his ability is spammable. And then the tricky part, in my opinion, about Magic World right now is choosing what spells you want to run. So I run a lot of 1-of spells, so I'll start with those. So we have one of the new pay 1 gauge, nullify the attack, and then next time you take damage, you will reduce the damage to 0. So it kind of helps against taking damage and getting pinged. Honestly, it's just a good generic card to run. I did run 2 Chest Break because I knew the tournament was running lots of Max Dragons. But after the tournament went down to 1 to make room for other cards. Yeah, Chest Break is very self-explanatory. Things like Crest. I ran into things that actually were relying on set spells like buildings. So I wiped the whole board of building cards before they got to actually use them all. Or if they did use them, they couldn't get the full effects off. 1 Buddy Block, mainly for other Garga decks, and probably a lost world for games I actually have more than 10 life, and I'm actually resting and nullifying attacks. One of the nullify monsters' abilities, or -5, -5, -1 crit God Magic. I only run one because I also run one of the gauge 2 that goes with it to let me search it. So usually in my starting hand, I'll gauge this first, and then later in the game when I need it the most, I'll play this to immediately get it back. And usually I'll have Magic Garga on the board to both nullify its effects, then pop it, so if it has Soul Guard, it will lose all chances of coming back. One lecture, I only could get a hold of one lecture. If I could, I would run it to 2. It pretty much just lets you look at the top 2 cards, put one in the gauge, one in your hand. Warrior, the bounce is a card if you have 3 or more spells in your drop. More damage reduction. Shadow Crusader, mill 3, which supports Magic Garga, and one other card in this deck, so you can keep recycling your spells but still play defensively. I play 2 Abracadabra to nullify spells. Usually, if there's a card I know people need to play to get their engine started, since they usually can only cast something once per turn, I'll play Abracadabra so they can't play it again for the turn. 2 of the Great Spell Circle of Deity Dragon. It gives +1/+1 to Dragon Deities. That's just a side plus. The real reason I run it is for the fact that during your opponent's turn, during the start of it, you can discard 1 card from your hand and add 1 spell from your drop to your hand. So usually, if you can lock down your opponent with the other spell that rests your opponent's monsters, usually they'll be limited to attack. Sometimes, like if you're playing Max Dragons, you won't be able to rest their cards at least, but you probably can tech in something for your sideboard against Max Dragons so you can continuously keep grabbing. To protect magic. I know some people run it at 1. I run it at 2. I feel more comfortable. It's just straight plussing for putting a spell back. If you have a Dragon Deity Tribe on the field, gauge 1, draw 1, gain 1 life. It is not once per turn, so you might as well just spam it when you can. I do have one spell from the triple deck, which is the Teaching of Fighting Emperor, which is just gauge for as many Dragon Deity tribes you have on the field, and then draw 1, which just helps me create more resources. Then we play 2 Holy Magic. Now, I did ask the head judge before the tournament started to ask if it worked the way it did in Singapore. It has been officially errated to it has to be different spells now. So that was good knowing that, because I know a lot of people play this at 3 to 4. So knowing that different spells matter, playing it at 2 is probably the optimal play. Honestly, early game, if you're not drawing into all your spells, then throwing them in the drop, this card just kind of floats there. So 2 is just enough. And then my last 2 of would be the Radiant Combat Deity's Glory, which for 1 gauge lets you technically G-evolve from the drop. So usually with Magidogs, drop 1 gauge and draw 2. I'll drop G-Evos early game to have them set up for later, especially for other plays later in the matchup. Nice one, self-explanatory. It's Magic World. You know you want to draw cards. Drawing 2 cards pretty much at least almost every other turn is nice, especially when you're just grabbing spells from drop or putting them back in your deck. Play 1 Examinate, which lets you look at the top 3. 1 goes to gauge, 1 goes to hand, 1 goes to your drop, and then you gain 1 life. This filters out for Holy Magic to put cards back. And then also set up for see your DDG Evos. It's a counter, so you can also play them in your opponent's turn to search out for answers. And then my item would be the broom. I honestly don't play the broom that often. I usually only equip it to play very aggressively, or if I have to actually start link attacking and Garga can't swing by himself. And for the last card in this deck, it's actually Lost World. It was originally the Impact. It is the alternative. I may play the Impact again just for the sake of either dropping it for Guard or actually pushing for game. But at the moment, during the tournament, I did not play the Impact. Then for the Lost World deck, I did play 4 of the Trial Deck Destroyer, which when he swings, he can either bounce or destroy a card, and he has double attack. It's very basic. He also cannot be destroyed. Bouncing, honestly, I've always relied on bouncing cards since early in Buddy Fight. So, to me, he's a great optional card to play. I played APOC. APOC was for, honestly, just max drags, dropping things that I just had a problem with, things with soul. He didn't get to really see play much in the tournament. Honestly, if I saw him, I had to gauge him, or he just sat in my hand. This was one of the monsters I played most during the tournament for Lost World, for when he has double attack, when he swings at you. When he swings, your opponent has to discard 1 card from their hand. So even if they want to nullify his attacks, they have to pretty much lose 2. And then just having 2 on board is an instant drop 4. I do play 1 skull. It's just there to swing for 5. Just swing for 5. 2 of the Trial Deck, pay 1 gauge to call it. When it enters the field, choose a card, nullify all its abilities, and then destroy it. Pretty explanatory. 1 card I wish I really had ran more of. I have 3 of them, but I only ran 1. Was the when a Lost Vader monster swings, destroy a card on the field, deal 1 damage. One of my matchups was literally Destroyer and 2 of these. So I went from having 18 life to going immediately to 0 in 1 moment. One Dimension Absorb. I also didn't get to draw this much, but obviously because I won. It's a simple just nullify, deal 2 damage, gain 2. I mean, it's just a decent card. Day of Destruction. Just avoid destruction of other things. The other effect does destroy all monsters on your opponent's field and deal 1 for each one, but in this format of Buddy Fight, a lot of people's main attackers could not be destroyed by card effects. So you just play it for defensively. Dimension Denial to nullify spells. At least that way, when I go in the Lost World, I have a alternative Abracadabra. Dimension Mirror, mainly for heavy crit decks, mainly like Max Dragon that swing for like 4 and 5. One Vile Vortex. I like this card a lot. It makes cards that I can't really play when I brick make it easy to play for free, including the impacts, spells, as well as the items. 2 Dimension Jamming, just to add on to more discard, especially when I have the discard double attacker. 2 of the Lost World promo that came from the Vile Vanity set. Honestly, I really like restamping stuff in Deity Garga, even after people think my battle phase is over. I love resting stuff. So again, with the set spell in Magic World, if I want to grab this, I'll just immediately depend on it. And then if I need to, I can also drop Soul in game gauge. It's just a very versatile card, especially for a Magic World deck, because Magic World usually isn't always dependent on the monsters, it's mostly the spells that make the deck. I do play 2 Vanity Cells. There was only one game I actually wish I had Vanity Cells in my hand, and it was against Buildings during the last game we played in Top 8. Which was mainly just the building impacts. 2 deep in Vile to look at top 4, gauge 2, 2 in hand. This usually, if I can start with this as soon as I go in the Lost World, I can usually set up even with this. Because usually, even though I'm in Lost World, I'll still have Garga, and then I'll usually have Radiant Glory. So I'll usually G-Evo with something in the drop and have Destroyer and Garga working together to push for game. And then 2 Dimension Waves to obviously try and get APOC if I can't sneak them in. Force other cards to leave the field so I can gain more resources. And since I don't run Gargantua Punisher, I run 2 Zero Blazer. I gauge so much when the deck gets going that it's honestly really easy just to spam both if you've gone through most of the Lost World deck anyway. This deck's pretty much just trying to control and beat down. And then for the sideboard, Plate 1 Neo. Honestly, I could have sideboarded it in, but I didn't need to. The rest 2 that's already in the deck, so I would just play it at 3. More chest breaks, because Max Dragons. Warrior to bounce. Another Day of Destruction. Another Dimension Mirror, mainly for Max Dragons. Loyalty. The Ancient World Garga, also for Max Dragons, especially early game. And then this was the Darkness Dragon World Garga, which does slightly the same as Neo, except it destroys and not returns, and then deals damage instead of heals. But I want to play this one instead, also for the Max Dragon matchup, because of it'll search my item, because I only run 2, and it'll either just sit in my hand or it's just stuck in the deck somewhere, or I'll have to depend on this one instead. But either way, they'll usually swing over Max Dragons by the time they're at least 3, 4, or 5. Usually by 6, I'm going to have to depend on dealing effect damage. And with that, that is the Magic Garga with Lost World deck. And we'll see you next time.